The eternal throne of the Valori Empire had stood for 12,000 years. It was carved from a single piece of black crystal taken from the heart of a dying star. 40,000 star systems answered to whoever sat upon it. 200 species bowed before its power. And today, Emperor Carthax IX sat upon that throne and waited for the humans to arrive. The Great Hall stretched for nearly a kilometer in every direction. Columns of polished metal rose toward a ceiling that showed the live feed of stars across the empire. Representatives from every vassal species stood in their designated sections, wearing their finest ceremonial clothing. This was a historic moment. The humans had finally agreed to come. For a century, humanity had expanded quietly along the outer rim of the galaxy. They had stayed in regions that nobody wanted. Dead systems, empty space, worlds too cold or too hot for most species. The Empire had watched them with mild curiosity but little concern. They were a young species, primitive by galactic standards. They would eventually understand their place. But they had grown. Their population had spread across dozens of worlds. Their merchant ships had begun appearing at neutral trading stations. And they had never once sent an ambassador to the Empire. They had never asked for protection or trade agreements or technology. They had simply existed as if the greatest power in the galaxy was not worth their attention. Emperor Carthax had decided to end this strange silence. He had sent a formal summons to Earth, the human homeworld. He had invited them to discuss their integration into imperial territory. The message had been polite but clear. This was not a request. And now they were here. The doors at the far end of the Great Hall opened. A small group of figures walked in. There were only 5 of them. 5 humans to face the assembled might of 200 civilizations. The one in front was a woman of middle age. She had black hair streaked with gray, and eyes that seemed to take in everything without revealing anything. She wore simple clothing in dark colors. No jewelry, no symbols of rank. Nothing to suggest she was anything special at all. Behind her walked 4 others. 2 men and 2 women. They were equally plain in appearance. They carried no weapons that anyone could see. They showed no fear that anyone could detect. The Great Hall fell silent as they approached the throne. Every eye watched them. Every sensor scanned them. The security systems of the palace could have killed them 1,000 times over before they took another step. And yet they walked as if they were taking a morning stroll through a garden. They stopped at the proper distance from the throne. The woman in front gave a small bow. It was respectful but shallow. The bow of an equal, not a subject. "Ambassador Yuki Tanaka," announced the court herald, his voice echoing through the hall. "Representative of the Human Confederation." Emperor Carthax studied her for a long moment. He was old by the standards of his species. His scales had faded from bright gold to pale yellow. His eyes had seen the rise and fall of rebellions, the conquest of 100 worlds, the slow grinding of time against all things. He had learned to read the hearts of beings from 1,000 different species. But he could not read her. "Ambassador Tanaka," he said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "You have traveled far. We welcome you to the heart of civilization." "Thank you, Majesty," she replied. Her voice was calm and clear. "We are honored by the invitation. We have watched your people with interest," Carthax continued. "You have grown strong in the outer regions. You have built well. It is time for you to take your rightful place among the peoples of the galaxy." He paused, allowing his words to sink in. Every species that had stood in this hall before had understood what came next. The Empire offered protection. The Empire offered technology. The Empire offered membership in the greatest civilization the galaxy had ever known. And in return, the Empire asked for loyalty, tribute, and soldiers when needed. It was a fair exchange. Most species understood this after a single demonstration of imperial power. Some required more convincing, but all of them eventually accepted. There was no other choice. "We offer humanity the standard terms of integration," Carthax said. "Tributary status within the Empire. A modest taxation on your economic output. Military conscription quotas to be determined by your population. And in exchange, you will receive the full protection of Imperial forces, access to our technology databases, and representation in the Advisory Council." He spread his hands in a gesture of generosity. "This is a generous offer, Ambassador. Many species wait centuries for such an invitation. We offer it to you now, at the very beginning of your journey among the stars." The great hall hummed with quiet approval. The representatives of 200 species nodded and murmured to each other. This was how it was done. This was how it had always been done. The humans would accept, as everyone accepted, and the galaxy would continue as it always had. Ambassador Tanaka listened to the translation in her earpiece. She waited until the Emperor had finished speaking. She did not look around at the assembled representatives. She did not seem impressed by the grandeur of the hall or intimidated by the power on display. She simply stood there, a small figure in plain clothing, and considered her response. Then she spoke. "Thank you, Majesty. We appreciate the offer. However, we must respectfully decline." The silence that followed was absolute. It stretched across the great hall like a living thing. Representatives who had been nodding stopped in mid-motion. Advisors who had been preparing the next phase of negotiations froze at their stations. Even the Emperor himself went still upon his throne. "I beg your pardon?" Carthax said. "We decline," Tanaka repeated. "These terms are not compatible with human sovereignty. We wish the Empire well in all its endeavors, but we will not be joining it." A wave of whispers swept through the hall. This was unprecedented. This was impossible. No species had ever refused the Emperor's terms outright. Some had negotiated. Some had delayed. Some had required military persuasion. But none had simply said no. "Perhaps you do not understand," said High Advisor Relix, stepping forward from his position beside the throne. "The Empire does not make this offer lightly. Refusal carries consequences." Tanaka turned to look at him. Her expression did not change. "We understand perfectly, Advisor. We have studied the Empire extensively. We know its history, its structure, and its methods. Our refusal is not based on misunderstanding. It is based on careful consideration." "Then explain yourself," Carthax demanded. His voice had hardened. "What could possibly lead you to reject the protection of the greatest power in the galaxy?" "We do not require protection," Tanaka said simply. "We are content with our current situation. We have no desire for imperial technology, as we are developing our own at a satisfactory pace. And we have no soldiers to spare for wars that do not concern us." "Every species requires protection," Relix insisted. "The galaxy is dangerous. There are threats you cannot imagine. Raiders, hostile empires, cosmic disasters. Without the Empire, you are vulnerable." "We appreciate your concern," Tanaka replied. "But we have made provisions for our own security. We are comfortable with our current level of risk." Emperor Carthax leaned forward on his throne. His eyes had narrowed to slits. In 12,000 years, no emperor had been refused in his own court. The insult was beyond calculation. "You are a young species," he said slowly. "You have existed among the stars for barely a century. We have endured for millennia. We have seen species like yours rise and fall 1,000 times. You do not understand what you are refusing." "With respect, Majesty," Tanaka said, "we understand completely. We simply disagree with your assessment of our needs." And if we do not accept your refusal? The question hung in the air. Every being in the hall understood its meaning. The Empire did not tolerate defiance. Worlds had burned for less than this. Tanaka met the Emperor's gaze without flinching. Then you will do what you believe is necessary. And we will do the same. But we hope it will not come to that. We have no quarrel with the Empire. We seek only to live according to our own choices. She bowed again, the same shallow bow of equals. We thank you for your hospitality, Majesty. With your permission, we will return to our vessel. Carthax said nothing. He simply stared at her, trying to find some crack in her composure, some sign of fear or doubt. He found nothing. The human delegation turned and walked back toward the doors of the Great Hall. They moved at the same unhurried pace. They did not look back. The doors opened before them and closed behind them, leaving only silence in their wake. For a long moment, no one spoke. The assembled representatives looked at each other in confusion and disbelief. The advisors waited for the Emperor's reaction. The security forces stood ready for orders that did not come. Finally, Carthax spoke. His voice was quiet, but it carried to every corner of the hall. Find out everything about them, he commanded. Their history, their capabilities, their weaknesses, everything. He rose from the eternal throne and looked toward the doors through which the humans had departed. And send Severax to their homeworld. If they will not come to us, we will go to them. They will learn what it means to refuse an emperor. The court burst into activity. Orders were given. Ships were prepared. The machinery of Empire began to move. But somewhere in the back of Carthax's High Diplomat Severax had served the Empire for 300 years. He had negotiated treaties with warrior species who ate their enemies. He had brokered peace agreements between civilizations that had been at war for millennia. He had convinced rebellious worlds to surrender without a single shot being fired. There was no species he could not understand, no culture he could not navigate, no problem he could not solve with the right combination of promises and threats. He arrived on Earth expecting a simple assignment. The humans had refused out of ignorance. They did not understand the honor being offered. He would educate them. He would show them the benefits of imperial membership. And they would accept, as everyone always accepted. His ship landed in a city called Geneva, on a strip of land beside a great lake surrounded by mountains. It was pleasant enough, he supposed. Clean air, green trees, a yellow sun that reminded him slightly of home. The humans who greeted him were polite and welcoming. They gave him a comfortable residence and promised to arrange meetings with their leaders. And then the problems began. The first problem was that the humans did not have a leader. Not a real one. They had something called the Human Confederation, which was a loose collection of independent worlds and stations that cooperated when they felt like it. There was no emperor, no council of absolute authority, no single person who could make decisions for all of humanity. Who do I negotiate with? Severax asked his assigned liaison, a young man named Thomas. Thomas smiled apologetically. That depends on what you want to negotiate about. Trade agreements go through the Commerce Board. Military matters go through Defense Coordination. Territorial questions go through the Boundary Commission. And each member world has its own government for internal affairs. But who makes the final decision? Everyone votes. If enough people agree, it happens. If they don't, it doesn't. Severax had stared at him in disbelief. That is absurd. How do you accomplish anything? Slowly, Thomas admitted. But we accomplish it together. This was the first sign that Severax's mission would not be simple. Over the following months, he traveled across human space. He visited Earth and Mars and the colonies on moons with names he could not pronounce. He met with Commerce Board directors and Defense Coordination admirals and Boundary Commission bureaucrats. He attended endless meetings in endless conference rooms, drinking endless cups of a bitter brown liquid the humans called coffee. And everywhere he went, he made offers. He offered reduced taxation. The humans thanked him but declined. He offered exemption from military service. The humans appreciated his generosity but declined. He offered guaranteed seats on the Imperial Advisory Council. The humans found this interesting but declined. He offered technology transfers worth more than the entire economic output of some vassal species. The humans examined the specifications, asked thoughtful questions, and declined. He offered exclusive trade agreements that would have made humanity wealthy beyond measure. The humans considered the terms carefully, consulted with their various boards and commissions, and declined. Every offer received the same response: polite interest, careful consideration, and then, always, a gentle refusal. Why? Sevrax demanded during one particularly frustrating meeting. What do you want that we are not offering? The human across the table, a gray-haired woman who served on the Commerce Board, thought about this for a moment. Nothing, she said finally. That is the problem, Diplomat Sevrax. We do not want anything from the Empire. We are content with what we have. No one is content, Sevrax insisted. Every species wants more. More power. More security. More wealth. It is the nature of intelligent life. Perhaps, the woman agreed. But we want these things on our own terms. We want to earn them ourselves. What you offer comes with strings attached. We would rather have less and be free than have more and be bound. It made no sense to him. The Empire offered safety, stability, certainty. What could possibly be worth more than that? As the months passed, Sevrax grew increasingly desperate. He had never failed a mission. The thought of returning to the Emperor with nothing to show for his efforts was unbearable. He began to hint at consequences. Nothing direct. Nothing that could be called a threat. Just gentle reminders of what had happened to species that had resisted imperial integration in the past. The Greth refused our terms, he mentioned casually during one dinner. A proud species. Very advanced. They no longer exist. His human host nodded sympathetically. That must have been difficult for them. It was difficult for everyone, Sevrax said. War is always expensive. For both sides. I imagine so. The Empire has 5 million warships. Trillions of soldiers. Weapons that can crack planets. No species has ever successfully resisted us. Those are impressive numbers. Sevrax waited for fear to appear in the human's eyes. He waited for nervous questions about imperial military capabilities. He waited for the conversation to turn toward compromise and accommodation. The human simply took another bite of his food and asked if Sevrax had tried the dessert yet. This became a pattern. Every hint of threat was acknowledged and ignored. Every reminder of imperial power was met with polite interest and nothing more. The humans were not stupid. They understood what Sevrax was implying. They simply did not seem to care. The strangest thing was their complete lack of military preparation. Sevrax had expected to find fortifications going up, fleets being assembled, populations being evacuated to safer regions. Instead, he found nothing. Life continued as normal. Children went to school. Workers went to their jobs. Ships traveled their regular routes. Either the humans were supremely confident or supremely foolish. Sevrax could not determine which. After 18 months, he requested permission to return to the Empire. He had accomplished nothing. Every tool in his diplomatic arsenal had failed. The humans remained exactly where they had started, politely refusing everything. His final meeting was with Ambassador Tanaka herself. the same woman who had refused the emperor in the Great Hall. "I do not understand your people," he admitted to her. "You have nothing to gain by refusing us. You have everything to lose. Why do you persist?" Tanaka poured tea into 2 small cups and handed one to him. It was a human ritual, he had learned. A sign of respect between equals. "What do you think we would gain by accepting?" she asked. "Protection, technology, trade, a place in the greatest civilization in the galaxy. And what would we lose?" Severax hesitated. "Some autonomy, perhaps. Some resources. But the benefits far outweigh the costs." "That is your calculation," Tanaka said. "Not ours. What is your calculation, then?" She sipped her tea and looked out the window at the mountains in the distance. Snow had begun to fall on their peaks. "We would lose ourselves," she said quietly. "We would become part of something we did not choose. Our children would grow up as subjects of an empire, not citizens of a free people. Our futures would be decided by others. Our destiny would no longer be our own. Is that worth dying for?" "Some things are worth more than survival, Diplomat Severax." He shook his head. "I have heard species say this before. They were wrong. When the fleets arrive, when the bombs fall, they always discover that survival matters more than pride." "Perhaps," Tanaka acknowledged. "But we will not know until it happens. And perhaps you will be surprised by what you find." Severax returned to his ship the next day. As he watched Earth grow small in the viewport, he dictated his report to the Emperor. "They cannot be bought," he said. "They cannot be threatened. They cannot be reasoned with. They want nothing from us." He paused, struggling to find words for what he had experienced. "They are not arrogant," he continued. "They are not aggressive. They are simply complete. They do not need us, Majesty. They do not need anyone. And I do not know how to negotiate with beings who have no needs." He ended the report with a recommendation that he knew would please no one. "I suggest we leave them alone. There is nothing to be gained from further contact. They will not change their minds, and any attempt to force the issue will be expensive beyond measure. Not because they are strong, but because they do not fear what we might do. I do not understand why this is, Majesty, but I fear what we might discover if we push them too far." The Emperor's response arrived 3 days later. It was brief and absolute. "Your failure is noted. Return to the capital. The Third Grand Fleet will handle what diplomacy could not." Severax read the message and felt something cold settle in his stomach. He had seen fleets deployed against stubborn species before. He had seen worlds burned and populations scattered. But he had never seen a species face such force without fear. Whatever happened next, he suspected the Empire was about to learn something important about humanity. He only hoped the lesson would not be too expensive. The Third Grand Fleet was one of the mightiest forces in the galaxy. 500 warships, each one capable of destroying a civilization on its own. 50 carriers packed with fighters. 100 troop transports filled with soldiers who had conquered 100 worlds. And at its center, the flagship Eternal Wrath, a vessel so large it had its own gravity. Admiral Varath commanded this fleet with absolute authority. He was old, scarred, and utterly without mercy. He had spent 2 centuries crushing rebellions and punishing defiance. The Emperor trusted him to deliver a message that diplomacy had failed to convey. The message was simple: submit or suffer. The fleet arrived at the human frontier colony called New Helsinki on a cold morning in local time. The planet was small, blue-green, orbiting a yellow star much like Earth's sun. 3 million humans lived on its surface. They had farms and factories and cities with tall buildings. They had schools where children learned and hospitals where the sick were healed. They had families who loved each other and dreams for the future. And now they had 500 warships hanging in their sky. Admiral Vorath opened communications. From the bridge of the eternal wrath, his image appeared on every screen on the planet below. "People of New Helsinki," he announced. "I am Admiral Vorath of the Third Grand Fleet. Your government has refused the generous offer of Emperor Carthax Ix. This was a grave mistake. However, the Emperor is merciful. He offers you one final opportunity to reconsider." He paused to let his words sink in. "Accept Imperial terms within 24 hours, and you will be welcomed into the Empire as honored members. Refuse, and you will witness what happens to those who defy us. The choice is yours." He ended the transmission and settled back in his command chair. This was the moment he enjoyed most. The waiting. The knowledge that fear was spreading across an entire world. The certainty that they would break. They always broke. Hours passed. Vorath watched the planet through his viewport. He expected to see evacuation ships launching from the surface. He expected to see panicked communications flooding the channels. He expected to see the signs of a civilization preparing to surrender or flee. He saw nothing. The cities remained lit. The factories continued to operate. Ships traveled their regular routes between the planet and its orbital stations. Life on New Helsinki continued as if nothing unusual was happening at all. "Perhaps they did not understand the message," suggested his aide. "Should we repeat it?" "They understood," Vorath replied. "They are simply slow to react. Give them time." More hours passed. Still nothing. Vorath ordered his sensor officers to scan the planet in detail. They found no military buildup, no fortifications being constructed, no weapons being deployed. The humans were not even moving their population to underground shelters. They were simply going about their daily lives. Then a small ship launched from the planet's main spaceport. It was a courier vessel, barely large enough for a crew of 2. It approached the fleet at a leisurely pace, broadcasting a request to communicate. Vorath allowed the connection. A human face appeared on his screen. A young woman with short brown hair and a patient expression. "Admiral Vorath," she said. "I am Lieutenant Chun, representing the New Helsinki Colonial Authority. We have received your message and wish to respond. Proceed." "We decline the Emperor's offer. We thank him for his concern, but we are not interested in Imperial membership at this time." Vorath blinked. "You understand what I have offered you? A peaceful path to integration?" "Yes, we understand." "We decline. And you understand what happens if you refuse?" "We understand that you have many large ships with many large weapons. We have discussed this extensively over the past several hours. Our answer remains the same." Vorath felt his scales flush with anger. "Your people will suffer for your stubbornness." "Perhaps," Lieutenant Chun acknowledged. "But we would rather suffer as free people than prosper as subjects. Is there anything else you wish to discuss?" "Yes," Vorath growled. "Leave your ship. Return to the surface. And watch what happens next." "As you wish, Admiral. Have a pleasant day." The connection ended. The courier ship turned and flew back toward the planet. Vorath stared at the screen for a long moment. Then he turned to his tactical officer. "The uninhabited moon," he ordered. "The third one. Target it with the main batteries of the flagship." "Sir?" "Do it. These humans require a demonstration." The order was carried out. The Eternal Wrath oriented its massive weapons toward a small gray moon that orbited New Helsinki at a distance of 300,000 kilometers. It was a dead rock with no atmosphere and no resources. No one would miss it. The flagship fired. A beam of light brighter than the local sun lanced across space. It struck the moon at its center. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then cracks appeared across the surface. Then the cracks widened. Then the moon began to break apart. chunks of rock the size of mountains tumbling away in all directions. Within minutes, the moon was gone. Only a spreading field of debris remained where it had been. The fleet's communications officers monitored every channel on the planet below. They waited for screams of terror. They waited for desperate pleas for mercy. They waited for the inevitable surrender that always followed such demonstrations. What they received was a formal message from the new Helsinki Colonial Authority. It was addressed to the Galactic Commerce Bureau, with copies sent to 17 neutral trading stations. We, the undersigned, lodge a formal protest against the Valori Empire for the unprovoked destruction of celestial body NH3, commonly known as Little Helsinki, in orbit around our registered colonial territory. This destruction has disrupted local gravitational patterns and poses a navigation hazard to commercial shipping. We calculate damages at approximately 2.3 billion standard credits, which we expect to be reimbursed within standard commercial timeframes. Supporting documentation attached. Vorath read the message 3 times. He was certain he had misunderstood something. They filed paperwork, his aide said in disbelief. We destroyed a moon and they filed paperwork. This is some kind of trick, Vorath decided. They are trying to appear unafraid to buy time. Increase pressure. Move the fleet into lower orbit. The ships descended until they filled the sky over New Helsinki's major cities. Their weapons remained armed. Their targeting systems locked onto population centers. At this range, they could level every city on the planet within seconds. Another message arrived from Lieutenant Chun. Admiral Vorath, we notice that your fleet has taken up position in our orbital traffic lanes. This is causing significant disruption to local shipping routes. We respectfully request that you relocate to standard visitor coordinates within 72 hours, or register for an extended occupation permit with the Colonial Traffic Authority. Forms are available on our public network. Thank you for your cooperation. Vorath threw his datapad across the bridge. It shattered against the bulkhead. What is wrong with these creatures? He demanded. We have enough firepower here to turn their planet into glass. Why are they not afraid? No one had an answer. For 3 days, the fleet held position over New Helsinki. For 3 days, the humans ignored them. Ships came and went from the planet's spaceports, carefully avoiding the military vessels, but otherwise operating normally. The cities continued to function. The children continued to go to school. The factory workers continued their shifts. On the 4th day, Vorath received a message from the Emperor himself, demanding a progress report. He did not know how to respond. He had conquered dozens of worlds. He had broken the will of species far more powerful than these soft, strange creatures below. But he had never encountered anything like this. He finally composed his report. Majesty, the humans observed us destroy a moon. They filed an insurance claim. They have requested that we register for packing permits. They are not reacting as any species should. I do not understand what is happening. He paused, struggling with what he needed to say next. I recommend further analysis before we proceed. Something is wrong here. These humans are either completely insane or they know something we do not. Either way, I am not certain that continued military pressure will achieve our objectives. I await your guidance. The Emperor's response arrived hours later. The Third Grand Fleet was ordered to hold position, but take no further action. A team of intelligence specialists was being dispatched from the capital. As Vorath read the orders, he felt something he had not felt in 2 centuries of warfare. Doubt. The humans below continued their lives without a care. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a terrible question had begun to form. What if they were not afraid because they had no reason to be afraid? What if the Empire, with all its power and all its ships and all its history of conquest, was the one that should be worried? He pushed the thought away. It was ridiculous. The Empire had never lost a war. The Empire would never lose a war. But the question remained, unanswered and growing, like a seed planted in darkness. The Imperial Intelligence Service occupied a building with no name on a street, with no number, in a city that appeared on no official maps. Its director, a female Valori named Malix, had served in shadows for longer than most species had existed. She had toppled governments with whispers. She had ended wars with well-placed secrets. She knew things about the galaxy that emperors never dreamed of. And now she sat in her office, surrounded by screens and reports, trying to understand a species that made no sense at all. Emperor Carthax had given her unlimited resources and absolute authority. Find out everything about the humans, he had commanded. Their strengths, their weaknesses, their secrets, everything. She had expected this to take a few weeks. 4 months later, she was still digging, and what she had found disturbed her more than anything in her long career. The investigation had started simply enough. Her agents had gathered publicly available information about human history, culture, technology, and military capability. This data painted a picture of a young species, barely 3 centuries old among the stars, with modest resources and limited power. Nothing threatening, nothing unusual. But then her agents had begun to dig deeper. The first anomaly appeared when they analyzed human expansion patterns. In 300 years, humanity had spread across a significant portion of the outer rim. This expansion had been remarkably smooth. No major wars with neighboring species. No resource conflicts. No territorial disputes. This was statistically impossible. The outer rim was filled with aggressive species, pirates, and failed states. Every other civilization that had expanded through that region had fought constant battles for survival. The humans had somehow avoided all of it. Malix ordered her agents to investigate further. They discovered that 3 minor empires in the region surrounding human space had collapsed over the past century. Not conquered, collapsed, from internal conflicts. All 3 collapses had followed similar patterns: political instability, economic disruption, civil war, fragmentation. The timing of these collapses had conveniently cleared paths for human expansion. Coincidence, perhaps? But Malix had learned long ago that coincidence was usually just conspiracy wearing a mask. She pulled records from imperial economic databases. The numbers for human military spending did not match their visible forces. Humanity maintained a modest defensive fleet, nothing compared to imperial standards. But their spending suggested something much larger. The discrepancy was enormous. Where was the money going? Her agents could not find out. Human financial systems were encrypted with methods that imperial codebreakers could not crack. Human communications were equally secure. The more they tried to penetrate human information networks, the more walls they encountered. Then Malix made a discovery that chilled her to the bone. Deep in the imperial archives, buried under centuries of forgotten records, she found a file about a species called the Kreth. The Kreth had been a powerful civilization in the outer rim about 200 years ago. They had encountered humanity early in human expansion. They had attempted to subjugate the human colonies in their region. The Kreth no longer existed. The official imperial records said nothing about what had happened to them. They had simply vanished from galactic history. But Malix found a single transmission, preserved by accident in a backup archive that should have been deleted long ago. It was the final communication from the Kreth homeworld before all contact was lost. To any who received this message, the transmission read, "We were wrong about the humans. They are not what they appear. Do not provoke them. Do not threaten them. Do not assume their weakness is real. They have capabilities beyond anything we imagined. We thought we were dealing with primitives. We were dealing with something else entirely. something patient, something watching. If you value your existence, leave them alone. Do not. The transmission ended there. Malik sat in her office for a long time, reading those words over and over again. Then she ordered the deepest investigation in the history of Imperial intelligence. Her agents spread across the galaxy, following every thread they could find. They interviewed species that had traded with humans. They analyzed human technology captured from abandoned vessels. They studied human culture, psychology, religion, history, everything. The picture that emerged was incomplete, but terrifying. The humans had been watching the galaxy for a long time, long before their first official contact with other species. They had hidden their true capabilities behind a mask of simplicity. Their defensive fleet was just what they chose to show. Their true military power was hidden somewhere that no one had ever found. They had been preparing for this moment for 300 years. Malix compiled her findings into a report for the Emperor. She spent days choosing her words carefully. What she had to say would change everything. She met with Carthax in his private chambers, far from the ears of the court. He sat in a simple chair, looking tired and old. The stress of the human situation had aged him visibly over the past months. "Tell me," he said. "Tell me what you have found." Malix took a deep breath. "Majesty, the humans have been lying to us. Not about their intentions, about their capabilities. They are not what they appear to be." She explained everything. The suspicious expansion patterns, the collapsed empires, the missing military spending, the encrypted communications, the fate of the Kreth. They have been watching the galaxy since before they officially made contact, she concluded. They studied us. They prepared for us. When we invited them to the court, they already knew everything about us. Our strengths, our weaknesses, our patterns of behavior. How is this possible? Carthax demanded. They are a young species. We have existed for 12,000 years. Age does not equal wisdom, Majesty, and neither does it equal power. The humans have achieved in 3 centuries what we achieved in 10 millennia. Their technology may appear primitive, but I believe this is intentional. They show us what they want us to see. Then what are they hiding? Malix hesitated. I do not know for certain, but I believe they have military capabilities that dwarf anything in this region of the galaxy. The missing resources in their budgets are vast, Majesty. If all that spending went to weapons and ships, they could be one of the most powerful forces in the galaxy. Impossible, Carthax said. We would have detected such a buildup, would we? They have hidden everything else. They manipulated 3 empires into destroying themselves without leaving any evidence. They eliminated the Kreth without anyone noticing. They are very, very good at hiding things. The Emperor was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was quiet. Why have they not attacked us? If they are so powerful, why have they not simply conquered us? That is the question that keeps me awake at night, Malix admitted. I believe they do not want to conquer anyone. They truly meant what Ambassador Tanaka said. They want to be left alone. They want to develop on their own terms. They want neighbors, not subjects. Then why prepare for war? Because they expected that someone, someday, would not leave them alone. They expected someone like us, and they prepared for that day. For 300 years, they have been preparing. Carthax closed his eyes. What do you recommend? Malix chose her next words carefully. I recommend that we withdraw the 3rd Grand Fleet. I recommend that we cease all pressure on human space. I recommend that we pretend this entire situation never happened and hope that the humans are as peaceful as they claim. And if we do not? Malix met the Emperor's gaze steadily. Then I believe we will discover exactly what the Kreth discovered. And we will share their fate. The emperor sat in silence for a very long time. Outside his window, the stars of the empire blazed in the darkness. 40,000 systems, 200 vassal species, 12,000 years of dominance. All of it suddenly felt very fragile. There must be another way, he said finally. We cannot simply surrender our pride. We cannot show weakness to our vassals. There may be one possibility, Malik said. Ambassador Tanaka is still willing to talk. She has not closed the door to communication. Perhaps a direct conversation, without armies and without threats, could find a path forward. What would we say to her? The truth, perhaps. That we do not understand her people. That we are concerned about what we have learned. That we wish to find a way to coexist without conflict. Carthax considered this. It went against everything he had been taught. Emperors did not ask. Emperors did not admit uncertainty. Emperors commanded and others obeyed. But emperors also survived. And survival sometimes required doing things that were uncomfortable. Send for her, he decided. Ask Ambassador Tanaka to return to the capital. Tell her I wish to speak with her alone, without the court, without ceremony. Just two people trying to understand each other. Malix bowed. A wise choice, Majesty. Is it? I suppose we will find out. He turned back to the window and watched the stars. Somewhere out there, in the dark spaces between the lights, the humans were waiting, watching, preparing. He had never felt less certain about anything in his life. 1 year had passed since the humans first refused the Empire in the Great Hall. 1 year of failed diplomacy. 1 year of military demonstrations that accomplished nothing. 1 year of investigation that had revealed more questions than answers. And now Emperor Carthax sat alone in a small chamber, waiting for Ambassador Tanaka to arrive. The chamber was simple by imperial standards. No throne, no grand decorations. Just two comfortable chairs facing each other across a low table. The emperor had chosen this room specifically because it held no symbols of power. He wanted this conversation to be different from all the others. The door opened and Tanaka entered. She wore the same plain clothing she had worn at their first meeting. No jewelry, no ornaments. She carried nothing but herself. She bowed slightly and Carthax gestured for her to sit. Thank you for coming, he said. Thank you for the invitation, Majesty. They sat in silence for a moment, studying each other. The emperor saw a human woman of late middle age, neither tall nor imposing, with gray threading through her black hair and lines of experience around her eyes. She looked like someone's grandmother. She looked completely ordinary. He knew now that she was anything but ordinary. I have spent the past year trying to understand your people, he said finally. I have failed. Tanaka nodded slightly. We can be confusing. That is an understatement. He leaned forward in his chair. My intelligence service tells me things about humanity that do not match what I see with my own eyes. They tell me you are ancient where you appear young. They tell me you are powerful where you appear weak. They tell me you are dangerous where you appear harmless. Your intelligence service is very thorough. They found records of a species called the Kreth. Do you know what happened to them? Tanaka's expression did not change. The Kreth made certain choices. Those choices had consequences. What kind of consequences? The kind that ended their civilization. Carthax felt a chill run down his spine. Her tone was calm, matter-of-fact, as if she were discussing the weather rather than the extinction of an entire species. Did you destroy them? We defended ourselves. The Kreth had options. They chose poorly. And if we choose poorly, will the same happen to us? Tanaka considered this question for a long moment before responding. Majesty, I want to be very clear with you. Humanity does not want war with the Empire. We have no interest in conquest, no desire for territory, no need for vassals or tribute. We want exactly what we have always said we want: to be left alone, to trade with those who wish to trade, to develop according to our own choices. But if we threaten you, then we will defend ourselves. Completely, absolutely, without hesitation and without mercy. She said it simply, without aggression or pride. She was stating a fact, not making a threat. My advisors tell me that your military capabilities are hidden, Karthak said. They tell me that what we see is not what you truly possess. Is this true? Yes. Will you tell me what you truly possess? No. Why not? Because you do not need to know. What matters is not the specifics of our capabilities. What matters is that we can defend ourselves against any threat. The details are irrelevant. Karthak leaned back in his chair. Then how can I trust you? How can I believe that you will not use this hidden power against us? You cannot, Tanaka admitted. Trust must be earned over time. All I can offer you is our record. In 300 years, we have never attacked anyone who did not attack us first. We have never taken territory by force. We have never sought to dominate or control others. We could have built an empire of our own. We chose not to. Why? With the power you possess, you could rule the galaxy. And what would we do with it? Tanaka asked. What does ruling bring except more problems? We would spend all our time managing vassals, suppressing rebellions, enforcing tribute. We would become exactly what we fled from when we first left Earth. We would become tyrants. The Empire is not tyranny. We bring order, stability, protection. You bring control, Tanaka said gently. You decide what species can do and cannot do. You take their resources and their soldiers. You call it protection, but what you really mean is obedience. And what do you offer instead? Freedom. Each world chooses its own path. Each person lives according to their own values. We cooperate when it benefits everyone. We go our separate ways when it does not. It is messy and slow and sometimes frustrating. But it is ours. Karthak thought about this. It was so different from everything he had known. The Empire had always believed that order required hierarchy, that peace required control, that civilization required obedience. What if they had been wrong? What do you want from this conversation? He asked finally. I want you to understand us, Tanaka replied. Not to agree with us, not to become like us. Just to understand that we are not a threat to you unless you make us one. We can exist side by side, your empire and our confederation. Different paths leading to different destinations. Neither one wrong, neither one right, just different. And the Third Grand Fleet, the demonstrations, the threats, we are willing to forget them. We do not hold grudges. We do not seek revenge. If you withdraw your forces and recognize our sovereignty, we will consider the matter closed. Just like that. Just like that. Karthak stood and walked to the small window of the chamber. Outside, the capital city stretched to the horizon. Billions of beings lived their lives under his rule. They looked to him for protection, for guidance, for strength. What would they think if they knew that he was considering peace with a species that had defied him? What would his advisors say? His military commanders? The vassal species who watched his every move for signs of weakness. If I do this, he said slowly, I will appear weak. Other species will question my authority. They will wonder if they too can refuse imperial terms. Perhaps, Tanaka acknowledged. Or perhaps they will see wisdom. It takes strength to fight. It takes more strength to choose peace when fighting is possible. The galaxy has seen enough war, Majesty, enough conquest, enough domination. Maybe it is time for something different. You asked me to change 12,000 years of history. No, I ask you to write a new chapter. The old chapters are already written. You cannot change them. But the future is still blank. You can fill it with whatever you choose. Carthax turned back to face her. What if I choose wrong? Then you will learn from the mistake and choose again. That is all any of us can do. He looked at her for a long moment. This small, ordinary woman who represented something he could not quite understand. A species that wanted nothing except to be left alone. A power that could destroy his empire but chose not to. For the first time in his reign, he saw a path forward that did not involve force. I will need time to prepare my court, he said. To explain this decision, to manage the reaction. We understand. Take whatever time you need. And you will wait? You will not use this delay against us? Tanaka smiled. It was a warm smile, genuine and kind. We have been patient for 300 years, Majesty. We can be patient a little longer. Carthax nodded slowly. Then we have an understanding. The Empire will recognize human sovereignty. No tribute, no conscription, no interference in your affairs. And in return, humanity wishes the Empire well. We will trade with those who wish to trade. We will welcome visitors who come in peace. We will be neighbors, not enemies. She stood and bowed, deeper this time. The bow of respect between equals who have reached agreement. Thank you, Majesty. I believe this is the beginning of something good. She turned and walked toward the door. Just before she reached it, Carthax spoke again. Ambassador. One last question. She stopped and turned. If I had refused, if I had ordered my fleets to attack, what would have happened? Tanaka was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft but certain. You would have learned why we were never afraid. She left without another word. Carthax stood alone in the chamber for a long time after she was gone. Then he called for his advisors and began the work of changing history. Far above the capital, Ambassador Tanaka's ship prepared for departure. In her quarters, she reviewed a message from Earth Command. It was brief and encoded. Diplomatic resolution confirmed. Stand down Protocol 17. She read the message once, then deleted it without accessing the attached files. There was no need to review the details. Protocol 17 would remain locked in its vaults, where it had waited for 300 years. Where it would continue to wait, hopefully forever. Some preparations, she reflected, were better left unused. Outside her window, the stars of the Empire blazed in the darkness. 40,000 systems, 200 species. An ancient civilization built on conquest and control. And now, for the first time in its history, it had chosen peace. The future was uncertain. The galaxy was vast and filled with dangers that neither humans nor Valori could predict. But today, in one small chamber, two beings had decided to try something different. They had decided to trust. They had decided to hope. It was not much, but it was a beginning. And sometimes, beginnings were all that mattered.